we always tend to do these agile kickabouts and talk with sort of tech people in delivery, in organizations that work with software particularly. And I thought it'd be pretty interesting to have a conversation with somebody that's far outside of tech, that's working in some completely different industry, and see how they are implementing techniques that are agile-like in their business to help their customers. So that's why we brought Sal along. Sal's a good friend of mine back from the tennis days. So he's a former Davis Cup tennis player. He had a tennis scholarship over in the States and came out with a finance degree. And he is currently coaching tennis. He is managing director of a very large indoor tennis center in central London. And previously he's been a coach at the All England club, which is Wimbledon. So I'm happy to welcome Sal, and he's going to talk us a little bit through his agile journey. And why don't you kick us off, Sal, with how you found out about this new way of working?
Well, thank you, Darren. Hi, guys. So I've known Darren now for 13, 14 years. We worked together for a number of years. Darren and I share lots of interests. He's definitely one of my best friends, probably my best friend in London. So Darren, years back, made a career change, got himself into the industry that you guys are in currently. And then one day when we were chatting on the phone just to check on each other, he said to me, well, we're doing some of these courses, why don't you join? And I asked, well, how is this going to impact me? How is that going to work for an industry that is outside of tech? Darren said that in his belief that this should be implemented across all fields, across all industries, that there is no reason why it shouldn't be successful doing something outside of tech. So I joined the course, and it was, I can't remember the exact course, Darren, do you?
Yeah, I think it was a scaled agile, implementing scaled agile course that you came on.
Anyways, I'm sitting there in the meeting. A lot of the concepts make quite a bit of sense, especially in the early presentation of it, meaning talking about the broad lines of what Agile is versus what a waterfall system is. And immediately you start to think about the place that you're in. And at that time, I think I just started my journey at Westway, which is the sports center I'm in right now. And only to realize that the system that we're implementing is totally a waterfall system through and through. Obviously, throughout the journey of that course, there are lots of things that I came across that I completely did not understand, as they were a little bit above my understanding, and mainly the main issue about it was that the terminology, a lot of it was unfamiliar to me. Anyways, I read more into the course, and I thought immediately that there are lots of things that I could take out of this course and implement at Westway. That's really how it all started. Shoot, if there's anything that you want to target right away, or do you want me just to?
Just I mean, what just let it all out, basically. I mean, I think we're interested in what you did to transform what was broken. So you said that it was already, you were operating kind of a waterfall sort of phased approach to delivering your services. How did that course sort of transform that for you, and what did you take away? What practices did you start implementing? Because I think a lot of people kind of are naturally kind of agile. They don't even know what agile is necessarily, but they're naturally pretty agile. I mean, I remember when I used to be a professional tennis player, And a lot of my coaches, funnily enough, operated with an agile mindset, right? So they were almost operating in sprints, little time boxes, getting fast feedback. And my coaches in particular like to focus on match play. So I'd go out there, and every single training session would be focused around a situation in a match, rather than just hitting balls from a basket, which a lot of other players did. So in that way, it's very much focused on the end to end. It's very quick and iterative, and looking to continuously improve, get continuous feedback, and improve our performance. So I think it sounds like, you probably, a lot of these ideas resonated with you anyway, because you're that kind of person. So what do you do?
Right. So I'll tell you exactly how it all started. And again, it all resonated right after that course we did. Is I went back and I thought about my interview with Westway. The first thing that the previous head of tennis that was there, it was a panel of people interviewing me, and the first thing he said to me is, "We want to make sure that the person who comes in make sure that does not change Westway as it is. We believe that Westway as a tennis program is like an oil tanker in the sea. And therefore, in order to move an oil tanker, you have to move it very slowly." so I did the course 2-3 weeks after this. I interviewed in January. I did the course in April. I remember that. And so immediately, what I started doing is, I thought, before I do any changes, before I make any moves, I need to understand what I'm looking at. I subjected the whole program, and we had a very extensive program. I'm talking over 700 juniors on weekly basis, over 500 adults on weekly basis. Number of hours that we are having in a program, and a program in tennis means, and a tennis program means that the center runs sessions for people to actually pay into, and therefore it's run by the center. It's not a court that you rent out, for example, and therefore there's more margin for the center to make on that. So I subjected the program to an analysis. The first thing that came to mind was, or came to the fore, was how many hours we're running. And it was a substantial number of hours that we were doing. None of these hours were subjected to any KPIs, for instance. The numbers of people that are attending them, whether these are successful or not, whether they are delivering on the goal that they're supposed to deliver. Is it delivering to the right people or not? Is there any criteria to what the people are coming into for? None of that was there. So I had to build a whole system of monitoring to start with. I didn't implement anything fancy. I just started with a bunch of Excel sheets that I had to do, where I could update quite easily. I started talking to all the coaches that we have, seeing what their opinions on it. And mind you, before me, nobody actually has sat with any of these coaches to see whether these sessions are successful or not, and what they think about these sessions.
So you had previously that very siloed mentality of each individual on their own, trying to make their own thing, and now you've kind of brought people together to get that. Yeah. Correct.
I mean, I worked there previously as a coach prior to going to the All England Club. And I remember working there for two years. And in 2 years, I've never been asked once to what I think needs to happen, or I've never been included in the decision making at all.
Can I just jump in and ask a question?
Of course.
Would you say that at that time there was a clear mission or vision for all of the people that were working there? Were they united, even if they were operating independently? Were they driving towards a purpose that was well defined, other than good tennis?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. As part of the analysis that I had to do is to analyze our product cycle, where we are in the product cycle. And again, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but By that time, the product cycle, by the time I've arrived, it has been 7 years since anybody has put or implemented anything new in the place. Now, when you go back to the beginning of that 7 years, the center was split into 2 different operating entities. One was run by the center, which was a recreational side. One was run by a private company that ran the performance side of things for juniors. And when these guys started, they started with a very small number of coaches, 4 coaches, all of them are top-notch coaches, and no more than 40 players. And they worked closely with these 40 players on a journey from the age of 7, 8, 9, and they moved them along all the way till the ages of 14, 15, 16. And from there, at 2 years after the beginning of the cycle, the 2 sides merged, and the entity that was running the performance was absorbed into the center itself, and that entity, led by 2 coaches, actually ran the whole thing. Does that make sense? And so all of a sudden, they started to capitalize on the success that that small performance program was doing by running a recreational program that kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until we by far exceeded capacity. They started taking as many sessions as possible. And at that junction, we were probably by far the most successful when it comes to a revenue point of view and a bottom line point of view. But when I subjected it to analysis, we realized that these specific years were actually the worst in terms of performance in our pipeline and development pipeline. So a lot of these pipelines started to fail because the numbers were too big, the quality of coaching was not that good. They started to lose that coherence between moving players from one line to the other as they progress. And so all of a sudden, when COVID came, and we had, because we're an indoor center, we had to shut down for a whole year and a half. We lost about 50, 60% of our players. And whoever came back was clearly underdeveloped, that when we tried to implement the same system, it just didn't work. It was clear that there was a lack of development that has been happening for about 5, 6 years prior to that. So now I came about.
I'm just going to jump in quickly, Sal. So that that original performance collective with 40 or so players, it sounds like they were very much focused on the players themselves, and i.e. the customer. And then when it was merged, it suddenly became about revenue. And so the customer centricity reduced. And then when you had the problem with COVID, a lot of those customers didn't have that feeling that they love the place. So they didn't end up coming back. Is that a fair assessment?
Part of it is yes, Darren. There's another part that just comes down to the nature of the game. Is by the time COVID has hit, a lot of the players that we had that age 13, 14 became 16, 17, and the guys who were 15, 16 became university age, and there is a natural drop-off in the sport at that age, as most of them have to decide whether they want to continue seriously with tennis, or tennis becomes just a side activity. So part of it is just the natural attrition of the game. But because the pipeline was broken the few years before, when we came back 2 years later, a lot of these players were not that successful, were not that great at the game, because at these formative years, they were not developed the right way, right? But ironically, we were extremely successful from a financial point of view at that stage. And it's just a perfect example of what a product cycle is. And so after COVID, that was my golden opportunity. And that's when I thought, you know what, this is where I could change everything. And I don't really have to worry, because our numbers were not that great. So there is no real pressure from the management above to say, well, where are these numbers? Where is that revenue? I need it right now.
You had a clean slate to just start attacking.
Correct.
I mean, it's the same problem that we see in large organizations, right? It's all about the now, and there's very little future thinking. You know, what's happening down the line.
But it's that realization, isn't it? It's the investment that was done on the small scale focused teams initially that was then wreaking success in the future. But I guess from the perspective of someone who's looking at the bottom line, you're seeing we're doing well, so we must be doing things right, without realizing that that's actually the output from previous effort, and then it caught up, right?
Spot on, Maggie.
Yeah.
Spot on. And the reason for this is there's two things, right? Actually, three things. No communication with the existing team on the ground that is delivering these sessions for you. I'll repeat, there are four things. One of them is this. Second, there is no communication and open channels with your customer base, right? So you're not getting a feedback loop that you're to understand how you're doing and whether they are getting what they need or not on regular basis. The third thing was there is no structure to monitoring this. Fourth thing is there is no actual revision or reviews on what actually has happened the past weeks or months. So you carry on for years not knowing that this is happening because you actually don't have the tools to monitor it.
Okay, so we kind of, I think you've made pretty clear the problem and the challenges.
So I thought I talked too much, so you gotta feel free to stop me.
I think that's great. So, I mean, so when you came back after COVID, what did you do? What did you put into place?
So part of the problem that I didn't talk about much is my leadership, the leadership on the team, and there are about 5 of them, right? 5 senior coaches. We were a team of 15, 16, which is actually at that junction is too many for the size of the facility we have. So part of the analysis was recognizing that the program was way too big for the existing facility and way too big for the business model and how it operates. I won't bore you with the details on that. But the 5 guys who really we rely on in order to lead the team, deliver the structure of the sessions, deal with the customers, and these were divided into a guy who is responsible for the adult programming, a guy responsible for the recreational side of the junior programming, a guy responsible for the performance side, and then a guy who is a guru who got sidelined by the previous head of tennis to become Coach Ed, which we really didn't need at that stage. So these guys just couldn't get along. And the 5 guys, for the exception of one of them, was not involved in the decision-making previously. So the first thing was trying to get these guys to function from the same playbook on the same frequency. And my goal, without telling them, was to try to get them all together and start to actually have a dialogue that is productive dialogue. The first, kid you not, 4 or 5 meetings would last 2.5, 3 hours. And they were just no more than a fighting session. Within 5 minutes, one person will say something and the other guy will jump on his throat. The other guy will say something, the other guy will jump on his throat. I mean, once or twice it almost evolved into a fist fight, and I had to step in and stop these guys. And so the first thing was for me to try to get these guys to understand that they have strengths and they have weaknesses, and how to utilize each other's strengths and weaknesses, and how to actually listen before you actually make a judgment call on what the other person is doing. And that
use their rackets to play with each other rather than hit each other with them.
Made sure no weapons were available at any of the right. So, yeah, exactly. So the first thing is, and I did this on purpose, is I said to them, listen, this is your program. You've got to tell me what you want to do out of this. What are we doing? What do you want to do as a collective? What do you think you're best at? Because at that time we were delivering everything under the sun. And we needed to become a little bit more niche in one department to another. I'm not saying we eliminate the rest of the programs, but we put more emphasis on one and we use the other ones as bolt-ons in one way, leading to that core product that we want to do. So I let them hash out the information, and they bit by bit got to a conclusion that they wanted to focus more on performance, right?
So you started giving them ownership.
That's exactly right. The goal was to give them that ownership and that autonomy in decision making, which they didn't have. And, you know, progressively the conversations started to become clearer. They started to become more actionable stuff that at the end of the meeting, like, oh, look, there's actually a couple of points that we could really put our hands on and start to work with. And so what we did is we reduced all of the programs that we have to small stuff, so we could actually pay more attention to the details, how we deliver these sessions, and at the same time allow the product itself to either grow or fail. So if the program was good, we'll get more demand on whatever specific program we're delivering. And whatever program wasn't really doing well, then it's not going to grow, and therefore we either cap it or we completely get rid of it. At the same time, I had to do this. I had to get rid of 3-4 members of the team that were poisonous for many reasons. And that allowed for a better cohesion in the team. Started to, on a weekly basis, hold a team meeting where I actually involved every single coach in the decision making, or at least they felt they are part of the decision making. And before you know it, the relationships between the coaches started to get better. Ideas that were given by one person were taken from somebody else and then added onto it. And somebody will grab that thread and add more to it. And that really started to bring ideas into what we're doing. And I didn't feel that I have to come up with everything on my own. And therefore also took the pressure of me having to deliver and me having to become the authoritarian, going back to the same old regime that we suffered under, right? That really was the start of it. We started to, on a monthly basis, sit and actually analyze what we've delivered for the past 4 weeks. How did it go? What went well? What didn't go well? What can we do differently to actually attract more customers and actually provide a better session within these sessions that we're delivering? What we started to do also is we started to involve all the coaches in what we're delivering in the session. Previously, the 2 heads of the department put a whole syllabus in that everybody had to follow blindly with no input. And so sometimes that works really well, and sometimes that works pretty badly. And by doing this, we allowed for more ideas to come into this. So everybody actually started to think, well, this guy actually has a good idea, and this guy has a good idea. And that allowed for the product itself to start to evolve into something different. Now, we did this for about 4 months. Then we sat again and we thought, okay, let's look at what we actually did. We realized that the few things that we did went really well. But then we also started to see that, a couple of the things that we did, for example, shrinking the core product, which was the starting blocks, which we call them the mini red, orange, and green. These are the smaller age groups, so 6 to 8, 8 to 10 years old, 10 to 12 years old. We shrunk these, which actually led to a problem. That meant that your pyramid base is quite narrow. So if we continue doing this for a number of years, say 2 or 3 years, then the percentage of these players that will evolve into or develop into performance players will be a very small percentage. It's the same percentage, say about 10%. These 10% out of 100 are 10 players. If you got 500, then there are 50 players, right? And so we had to address that very quickly. We also started to see that the uptake on the performance wasn't that great. How did we discover this? We started to actually do parents' meetings. We haven't done parents' meetings in over 8 years, right? And so we scheduled about 4 parents' meetings, about a month and a half in periods of time, of which out of the 50 players we had a set of parents of only 5 people show up every meeting. So immediately that told us one thing, that none of these players that we have in so-called performance are actually performance, because clearly part of the issue is the players themselves look at this as an activity and not as something that they want to drive into. So immediately we started to address this by thinking, well, all right, that's cool, but we don't need to push that side of the product that much. And we could actually start focusing a bit more on that base side of things a bit more, because we have the capacity to move coaches along to do these sessions. But that decision making wasn't an individual decision making, it was a collective decision making.
So you've got like in your words there, you've got a lot of key fundamentals of agility, right? You've got the continuous improvement. You're constantly, assessing what how you can improve and get better. You're doing little retrospectives with your team. You've got the iterative development stuff. You're slowly sort of making adjustments and changes based on that feedback. You're meeting with the customer, or the customers, in this case, the customer's parents, to get their feedback as well. And I think you're promoting a sort of servant leadership sort of mindset within your team. So they've got far more ownership, and you're creating far more engagement in the team. And I think that is really something that there's an awful lot of talk in Agile circles these days about. It's all about the customer centricity. And that is very, very true, right? But especially in a service business like you're in, I think it's vitally important that, you have that same mindset with your own staff members, because they're the face of your business. And if you lose that, then you end up losing the customers anyway. So I think it's a two-pronged thing that you guys seem to be doing pretty well.
You also, I don't know if this was something you covered on that training course or not, but you did some McKinsey Horizon modeling, where you mapped out all of the different programs that you had on offer and applied sort of a pivot or persevere type. You started to model where you wanted those programs to go, rather than just what most organizations do is just let the streams go on forever and say, well, some will make more money than others, but they don't really strategize and consciously plan and respond and apportion value and resources, across those things appropriately. That's really interesting.
I also really liked how you did that, right? Because you went in, you saw some issues, you did some observation, you did some analysis, you really tried to understand what the issues were, what the opportunities for improvement were. And like you said, you collected some quantitative data in your Excel sheets, and then you had chats with the coaches to get your qualitative context around that. And then you were in a group of people who, and we see that a lot in tech, and I'm sure in every industry, where you have a room of experts and specialists, you have very strong opinions, and everyone's coming from a place of experience and knowledge. So they can be very passionate about defending my way is the right way. And the way you approach that with getting them to unite around, okay, but what are our goals? So then how can we each contribute towards those goals to convert that energy and passion that they have from fighting with each other to understanding what is the input, what is the value that I can bring to get to those goals.
Exactly.
That focus, and then the prioritization of the goals, that is like spot on by the book as well.
Yeah, see,
can I guys get you to speak to my manager?
Happy to share the video. No, but it's because it's so tempting when you walk in and you see as an outsider, right? You're a new person. You can very often see things that people within the organization have grown accustomed to and don't really see and understand. It's their status quo. So we kind of have a tendency of not really seeing those things. But when you walk in, you see them immediately, and it can be so tempting to become one of the people who is saying, I know the right way, and try to shoehorn the solution into it. But what you did is you used a really, really considerate and sweet approach towards understanding what was happening, why it was happening, and how to turn what you were seeing into your benefit, really, into the organization's benefit.
Yeah. What's interesting is, and I don't know how would the response would have been, is I had to convince these people that there was a dynamic which is a little bit different. Is I was one of these coaches, right? And then I came back as the leader of that program, which is an interesting dynamic on itself, by itself, because you've got to make sure that you know how to keep the friendships going, but creating a line where they start to see you also as the leader. But one of the tricks that I had to deploy, and I do this on a regular basis, is I allow time first for these people to actually get to know me and allow myself to know them better. But then at the same time, I needed to convince them that I am one of them. So one of the things I did, which is really different than what my predecessors have done, is none of my predecessors will step on court. None. They will just sit in the office and become a manager. And a lot of the times they don't really see what's happening on court. And so what I did is in order for them to feel that, oh, this guy's one of us, I actually stepped in, and I'm actually on the rota to do a lot of the sessions myself. Anytime there's somebody missing, I step in to plug these holes, but I have also a regular number of hours that I'm delivering. So I am actually part of the decision making as a coach, from a coaching point of view. And I think
leading by example, Sal.
That's exactly right. So that allowed me then to start putting things forward, and that allowed them to be more receptive to what I'm saying. But the problem with this is it takes a bit of time. So my question to you will be, well, if you are going to implement something as drastic, let's say a company is running in a waterfall system, right? And you want to go in and become quite agile. That's a big shift to how people actually deliver. So how do you do this with time? In my case, it's not very time sensitive, because I'm going to get in and most likely, unless I completely, excuse my language, F up on what I'm doing in my job, then I'm there for as long as I want to be. So I don't have that pressure of I need to deliver now, right? I've got a bit of time behind my back. So I allow myself these months, or even a whole 12 months before I started actually making these big changes. But how do you guys approach it then?
So the most financially lucrative way of doing that, and the one that an awful lot of the larger consultancies do, is they go in there and they sell this dream of a full-scale transformation. You're all going to be agile. Your huge organization of 100 development teams is going to be agile in 6 to 12 months. Yeah. And you need to pay us X million dollars to go and do it. And those consultancies do very well in terms of their revenue. Yeah. But what they don't do so well in is actually eliciting the right kind of change in the organization they're going into. So when we have those kind of conversations, we usually recommend, again, we want to do it iteratively and get fast feedback. So we recommend a sliver of the organization that's delivering a distinct piece of value. We go in there, we help that sliver, and then kind of success breeds success, right? So once that sliver of the organization starts doing really well, then of course every other part of the organization, they put their hands up, say, oh, can we have some of that? We want to try that. We want to do that. And then it becomes quite an organic process, and you can elicit that change over a period of time.
And I think the first thing that we do as well is the first step for us is not to go in and start making change. It is literally to sit and listen and pick people from, not the senior leaders, because we know why they want us there. That's usually very, very clear. But then picking a bunch of random people within the organization, I mean, not completely random, but people that are actually closest to the work, that are responsible for the day-to-day, and sitting down with them and just letting them talk and hearing what the pain points are, and then saying, right, okay, cool. Now we can work on ways that we can solve that using Agile. Awesome. Then, you know, that's where we get the buy-in from them, because most people, they just want to feel heard, even if it doesn't end up going 100% the way they want. As long as they've had their say and know that genuinely we've tried to accommodate it as much as we possibly can, then they usually are on board.
Yeah. Basically what you did, Sal, right? You had those conversations with the people doing the work, you know, and
yeah. And there'll always be some that just don't get on board with it for whatever reason. They feel like they've know better, or they've been in it longer than you have, and they just don't want to make the change. Okay, well, maybe that's not the right place for them to be anymore, or maybe it never was. But, you know, I think the wrong thing to do is just to keep those people indefinitely as well. And just be realistic about, well, this is the culture that we want. This is what we want to promote. And if you're on board, we'll give you all the help you need. But if you're not, then there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
You've done some things that are pretty uncommon, certainly intentionally uncommon in your arena, in your industry. And, you know, I think we've asked a lot of questions. We've understood the things that you put in place and how they sort of mirror a lot of the things that we do in large organizations. So I guess, look, thanks for your time, Sal. Thanks for coming on and having a chat with us. And we'll definitely have you back once you've you know, implemented that across the British tennis organization, because that's genuinely needed.
Interestingly, we are part of a big company called Everyone Active, which is a big leisure company. And so part of the challenge is the company insists on doing everything from a tech point of view, and all of our stuff has to go on a software system, obviously, that does the bookings and does all of the session stuff. But that is run by a central system in Leicester somewhere, where a lot of the stuff is done through terrible 1990 style spreadsheets that half of them get lost, half of them don't get addressed for a number of months. And so a long conversation has been going with, you know what, we could actually do the same work a lot quicker if you just let us do it from our center, right? We have a very capable administrative guy that could actually do all of this work with ease and a lot quicker. And so you look at the systems that they're running, and the next step will be, well, how can you do this and include a more agile system when it comes to the whole company and not just what we're delivering in one center? And so hopefully maybe one day the higher ups will listen to me, and we'll get you guys on a meeting with them.
Yeah, it would certainly be interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for joining. And I guess we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for all your thoughts. I'll be doing my yoga workouts with clear KPIs from now on. And I'll be collecting data and going straight towards improvement.
All right.
Thank you
guys.
Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
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 See you.
Bye.